What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. I've been paying attention to some model runs. I've been paying attention to a few indicators, and it does look like there is a possibility for some tropical development to occur in the Gulf region near the Bay of Campeche. So we're going to be talking about that today, also following up on what's going on in the Eastern Pacific, and talking about the conditions about what could facilitate that development in the Bay of Campeche, as well as we've seen some decent ensemble support. We've seen some operational support on it. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that, and let's go ahead and dive right into it right here. Let's go ahead and start with the Eastern Pacific region from the NHC. And let's go ahead and talk about this because we have a 90-90 probability of development for Invest 93E over here. So let's go ahead and read this. Showers and thunderstorms are gradually becoming better organized in association with a broad area of low pressure located a few hundred miles south of southern Mexico. Environmental conditions appear conducive for continued development of the system, and a tropical depression is expected to form in the next day or so. While it moves generally west-northwestward, interests along the coast of southern and southwestern Mexico should closely pay attention to the progress of the system. 90% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 90% in the next 7 days. So that's something you're going to want to pay attention to and keep a very close eye on as well. We also have another area of interest that we're going to talk about a little bit as well. We have this 20% probability that's kind of remained unchanged. This is more of a long-term threat, so we're going to be paying attention to that right here. But here we go. An area of low pressure is forecast to develop late this weekend or early next week near the coast of Central America. Environmental conditions appear conducive for some gradual development of the system as it moves west-northwestward near the coast of Central America and southern Mexico. Formation chance in the next 48 hours is near 0%. In the next 7 days is 20%. So that's more of a long-term threat that we're going to want to pay attention to going forward. So that's what we have going on in the Eastern Pacific. Two potentially new named storms going up over here as well. It's been quite active over there over the last little while. So let's go ahead now and move to satellite imagery and break it down a little bit more. All right, let's go ahead and shift over to the EPAC right now just to kind of give you a general idea. So this is Invest 93E right now. Invest 93E, we can go ahead and zoom in on this a little bit more. You're not seeing that much convection developing. Okay, it's taking a second right there. You're not seeing that much convection, at least until just recently, near the center of the mid-level circulation over there. Once you see more convection firing up in the center of the system, I would pay more closely attention to it of when it starts to organize and develop. I mean, it is organizing right now, but it's just taking its sweet time doing that. So that's kind of a zoomed in version of it right here. Let's go ahead and go back out to the EPAC just to kind of give a more synoptic scale view of it. So you're seeing a lot of convection firing off on all cylinders. It's just not in the center of circulation, ladies and gentlemen. And you have a little bit of inflow that's trying to get its act together. But as of right now, it's just kind of more of a globular, slopical mess, as some of my guys at Storms United would like to call it. So that's pretty much what we have right now. I do think it's going to potentially develop in the next 24 hours. It just needs to get that convection to the center of circulation. It's in a good environment to do that. However, it's kind of holding itself back in many regards, so we're going to want to pay attention to that as time continues to go on. Also going to go ahead and take a quick look at the water vapor imagery as well, just to kind of see what's going on with this right here. And here's the situation. It's in a pretty moist environment. Not too much can really be said about it. It's in good conditions, low wind shear, plenty of warm water to support this, and it's, like I said, in a moist environment. There is some dry air that's kind of starting to move a bit further to the south. That is kind of off the coast of western Mexico over there, but that's to be expected. This is expected to move towards that region and get choked off and dissipate in the next little while. So we'll briefly talk about that with the models. Let's go ahead and shift over to the EPAC very quickly as we take a quick look at this. This is the European run. Let's go ahead and run with this right here. Let's go to the 0Z just to get a more long-term forecast. But here's the situation. Expected to organize and develop. This is going to be a relatively large but broad type of system. The pressure gradient isn't going to really tighten that much compared to what we saw with Barbara and Cosme. This is going to be a tropical storm at most. That's going to bring some heavy rainfall across much of Mexico and then dissipate once it gets into that dry air and higher shear and cooler water temps. So that's pretty much what we have going on right there. Really not too much to see. We'll have to keep paying attention to it. So that's what we have going on in the Eastern Pacific right now. Things are dying down a little bit over there, especially compared to what we were seeing previously. So let's go ahead now and shift over to the Atlantic because we have a lot of things to talk to you about right there. So let's go ahead and start with the satellite imagery of what's going on. So here's the situation that we have going on. We are looking at a potential tropical wave that's going to move through much of the Caribbean, through parts of Central America, and potentially through the Yucatan Peninsula. That's potentially going to organize and develop over parts of the Bay of Campeche. If we go ahead and show you what we're looking at in terms of water vapor imagery right now, kind of mixed signals right now, but this is going to be more of a threat that's going to happen starting in the next 5 days or so. So we're going to be watching that very closely. There's decent ensemble support, decent model support, and the conditions do look decently favorable for that time period to allow for tropical development to happen. So that's pretty much the general gist as to what's going on. So what we're gonna be looking at the conditions right now and kind of gathering, okay, we're seeing all this stuff right now. The models are picking up on something. How reliable is this? And is this going to be another situation where it's just kind of, we see the chances develop on the ensembles, but then it fades off as it moves to the Eastern Pacific. So let's go ahead now and move on to the conditions. And the first one we're going to look at, obviously, is the global sea surface temperatures. That's not going to be an issue at all. As like I said in previous videos, SSTs are less of a factor and more of a constant. And what I mean by that is it's less of a, okay, are the water temperatures going to be warm enough? And more of, okay, the water temperatures are warm enough. We don't need to worry about that. But it's still important to highlight what's going on over here. And just to kind of quickly zoom in on this, actually I just zoomed out on this a little bit. I apologize for that. But here's what we have in the Bay of Campeche right now. We're looking at overall 29 to 30 degrees Celsius waters, which is 84 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who live in the United States and not use the metric system. But we have a lot of 29 plus degrees Celsius waters in there, as well as some 30 degrees Celsius waters that have been popping up over the last couple of days in these parts right there. Those are very surface level water temps that are in the 30 plus degrees Celsius range, so you're going to want to keep that in mind. However, you still want to pay attention to those because a system that develops over there is definitely going to have plenty of fuel and plenty of warm water to develop, especially as the Gulf continues to surge right here. And this does not stop, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at what we've been noticing over the last 5 to 6 days over here. We've noticed that you remember how we started to surge back in May, like especially the second half of May. Right here, you're seeing that massive uptick. Well, we're seeing a second massive uptick right now that's lasted already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days right now, and that's likely going to continue as we're going to continue to see a ridge system and a high pressure system kind of build up around the southeastern United States and near the Gulf region. That's going to bring more kind of block in a lot of the heat, cause another heat dome effect to take shape. So we're going to want to take a quick look at that as well. We're going to actually shift over to the models. We're going to shift over to the North Atlantic, and we're going to go ahead and pivot over to the 500 millibar height anomalies. And I think these are especially important considering what may be going on in the Gulf. So here's what we got going on. So basically, we have a ridge that's going to be moving over across at least a ridge pattern building up across parts of the Gulf. We're seeing potential high pressure system starts to build up over here. Higher height anomalies than average. For those of you who do not know and are saying, "Oh, Patrick, why are you looking at this? What does this have to do with tropical development?" What this kind of tells you right here is essentially, higher heights equal higher temperatures. That's pretty much the general gist of it. When there's warm air, air typically expands. When it's warmer, air typically expands. When it's cooler, air typically contracts. It's pretty simple like that. So that's why you see when you see lower heights, you see cooler temperatures typically. And that's why, for example, this is for snow, you need a 500 millibar height of about 5,400 meters, at least in terms of the thickness for snow to take place. That's kind of what we've been noticing in terms of dynamics. That's a lot of dynamics I'm not going to get into, but what I am going to get into is just this ridge pattern that's just not going to stop. It's going to be over much of the United States. It's going to impact a lot of the Gulf. We might see another heat dome effect situation happen, and it's pretty consistent going forward. And why is this important? Because that is going to continue to warm up the SSTs in the Gulf. Particularly important because we're looking at potential development right now. What we're looking at right now, here's the temperature that we're seeing. We're already at 29.25 degrees Celsius right now. We've been seeing major upticks in the amount of water and the water temperature going forward, and that is something that is very concerning to me as a forecaster. You may see look at these values, and you may look at these upticks. That's like about 0.12 degrees Celsius. That's like 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit, and go, "Why are you talking about this, Patrick? That doesn't sound like much." Two things you need to understand. Number one, those upticks add up. And that's going to allow, and that's why we're seeing these such a warm temperature. So if you see 0.12 degrees Celsius upticks every single day, it keeps adding up. It keeps adding up, and you see warmer and warmer temperatures. Second reason, we're not talking about a bedroom over here worth of water. We're talking about an entire body of water. We're talking about an entire synoptic region of water that we're talking about. That's just kind of giving you the general scale as to what we're looking at with this. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you the climate reanalyzer. We're seeing the surge again, and now we're pulling once again somewhat close to what we were seeing last year in 2024. We're about, I'd say, 0.4 degrees Celsius away from the record from last year. Yes, things did cool down a little bit. There was some more mesoscale convection that occurred around this time last year. But by and large, what you're noticing with this is you're going to see this surge continue, especially as that heat dome and that higher pressure starts to build up across parts of the Gulf and parts of the southeastern United States. It's all connected. So that's what we have going on with the Gulf. Let's go ahead now and take a look at some other factors like OHC. What's the OHC going to be like right now? OHC definitely been upticking across parts of the Bay of Campeche. I would argue it's not going to be as big of a factor compared to what we might see later on for one good reason, and that is because it's not. The question isn't oh, how long is it going to stay over water? The question is, how will it stay over water long enough for it to develop? That's the main question that we're looking at right here, and we'll get more into that later. But if it does stay over that water, you're still looking at about 50 plus OHC, which is conducive for some pretty decent strengthening, in my opinion. Thank goodness this isn't happening in the loop current or anything like that, where we're now seeing returns cracking 150 OHC in the very middle of that huge blob over here that represents the loop current. And we're continuing to see that OHC trickle further and further to the north. We're seeing more and more build up in the Western Caribbean as well. So we're going to want to pay attention to that for future endeavors down the road. So now let's go ahead and pivot over to the wind shear. Okay, what's the wind shear looking like? Right now, it's not very favorable. We're looking at like 30 knots of wind shear across the Bay of Campeche, which isn't really good for tropical development, but you're going to want to watch how these wind shear patterns do change. So let's go ahead now and take a quick look at the wind shear right now according to what we're seeing in the Bay of Campeche. Expected to increase a little bit, expected to fluctuate up and down for the next couple of days. And then it's expected to start weakening just a little bit. And then you're starting to notice about 5 days out, there is a bit of a chance where we could see some wind shear, at least in terms of what we're looking at, start to decrease enough. Where yes, there is going to be some more shear that moves into the region, but you do notice, especially from like 84 to 120 hours out, the wind shear does decrease a little bit, just enough for potential tropical development to happen, according to the European. Taking a look at the GFS just to kind of compare and contrast as well. Okay, what's the GFS going for with this right here? GFS, pretty strong wind shear going on right now. as the system moves. But as you start to get to about 7 days out or so, you do have a pocket of low wind shear that this system could take advantage of and allow for it to potentially develop. Yes, the shear is not going to be particularly that great, but if it weakens enough and the outflow hits that wind shear at an angle to allow for that gradient to tighten up, it could cause some interesting stuff to happen over there. So that's pretty much the general gist as to why we're looking at the wind shear. We're looking at, okay, how favorable is the environment right here? And it looks like it's not going to be great in terms of wind shear, but you're going to have some other factors that kind of help make up for it. One of them is the moisture, ladies and gentlemen. Moisture is going to be pretty interesting. Not a lot of dry air is over the Bay of Campeche, and you're going to see about 5 days out the start of a moisture surge, part of that tropical wave that moves over that region over there. You're going to want to pay attention to that. That moisture surge is going to stay over that part of the Gulf for about 3 to 4 days or so to allow for tropical development to happen before dry air intrudes and kind of shuts it down for a brief period of time. So that's kind of the general gist in terms of dry air. We're not going to see that much dry air. We're going to see pretty moist air. We're going to see plenty of warm waters. Wind shear is the one factor I'm paying attention to because that might be the make or break type of situation because tropical cyclones do not like to develop in a lot of wind shear. We know this. They are not attached to fronts and they rely on their energy not on baroclinic forcing, but instead they rely on it on theta E, and that wind shear could definitely disrupt it. So we're going to have to pay close attention to that. Also paying attention to the anomalies as well, once again, to see what's going on. We're looking at a more moist setup than average compared to what we were seeing, we like to see previously. And that's what's really going to allow, and that's really kind of the red flag for tropical development right there, ladies and gentlemen. And that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. So that's kind of what we have for the conditions. Let's go ahead and show you some runs that are kind of indicating that stuff's going to happen. So here's what we have going on. This is the 12Z European from yesterday. So let's go ahead and actually move this over a little bit just to show you this. But here's the 12Z European ensemble runs from yesterday. And what we were seeing was more of these ensemble runs picking up on tropical development near the Bay of Campeche, kind of hugging the coast. So we're going to have to see if it moves far enough away from land for it to get a shot at development, because the conditions, apart from the shear, do look decently good for it. Question is, will it be far enough away from land to do that? And there's a lot of ensembles that were picking up on this yesterday. Looking at the 0Z has downtrended a little bit, but there is a little bit more power to that as well. And the problem is the reason the amount of ensembles are down isn't because the tropical wave is going to dissipate. No. The question is it going to be over water long enough for it to develop? And that's the main question, and that's kind of the thing that we're going to want to pay attention to going forward, ladies and gentlemen. Pivoting over to the GFS ensembles, GFS is really, really showing a strong signal with this. Now, granted, it is the GFS, so you want to take it with a grain of salt, but the fact that the GFS is showing such a strong signal with this is really showing, okay, they're pretty confident something's going to happen with this. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Now, granted, do I think the intensity of the GFS is predicting is going to happen? No, I don't think it is at all. Matter of fact, I can show you the 12Z GFS right now to show you what we're potentially looking at. They want this system to become a hurricane that makes landfall in Belize, moves into the Bay of Campeche, and then develops a low pressure system from there. It's definitely a lot broader, I will say as well. So what I would take a look at right now is that's the GFS, kind of just taking a quick look. Looking at the Euro, similar situation right here. It tries to organize and develop. The question is, will it stay away from land long enough for it to do that? And that might be a potential thing to take a look at over there. And I'll go ahead and move this over a little bit over to the right just to readjust. But yeah, that's the main question we have going for this. Now let's take a look at the Canadian run. We'll look at the 12Z with the Canadian run. Canadian run has the system potentially moving in, organizing, gets up to tropical storm strength before making landfall in Mexico, stays out to sea long enough to develop, and then let's go ahead and show the Icon run very quickly. So Icon has the system moving through Central America, then potentially organizing and developing, maybe weak tropical storm strength before it moves into Mexico and southern Texas. So we're going to want to take a quick look at that. But what I will say, and this is my opinion, this does look like another, if it does develop, another Alberto setup where it was very large but very broad. So that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. So a lot of rain is possible for a lot of the regions that are going to get impacted, and we will continue to update you on the other risks here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.